We begin in eastern Libya, where thousands have died in devastating floods and more than 10,000 are still missing. On Sunday, more rain fell in one day than over the past 40 years. It burst two dams upstream, channeling a wave of destruction towards the port city of Derna. Michael Apple reports.
A witness to the disaster points to where the flooding that would devastate Derna was unleashed. Two dams holding huge amounts of water burst, sending a wave towards the city. Satellite imagery shows them before the floods. The first dam was 12 kilometers upstream. The second dam was on the city's outskirts. When the dam walls crumbled, almost like a reverse tsunami, the water cut through Derna's neighborhoods, destroying bridges, roads and homes, sweeping residents out to sea as the waves struck the low-lying coastal town. Derna had a population of around 100,000. The human cost of the disaster is still being counted.
Now let's turn our attention to Libya, a country of 6 million people where a powerful storm has unleashed catastrophic floods. They're ripping through the eastern city of Derna and affecting at least 6 other cities. More than 2,000 people are dead, around 6,000 are missing, 2 dams have collapsed, entire neighborhoods have simply been washed away. Footage shows buildings erased, cars submerged and torrents of water rushing through the streets. Authorities say they did not anticipate a disaster of this scale. Our next report tells you more.
Entire neighborhoods simply washed away. Torrents of water rushing through the streets, collapsing buildings, submerging cars, and killing at least 2,000 people, with about 6,000 missing. This devastation has befallen Libya, a North African country home to about 6 million people. A powerful storm has unleashed massive floods, which led to the collapse of 2 aging dams. This released a swollen, fast-moving river. Now floods are ripping through the eastern city of Derna. It is the worst hit, but several other cities have been affected as well, including Al-Baida, Al-Marj, Tobruk, Takinis, Beta and Benghazi. Several bridges have been destroyed. 3 collapsed completely. Entire residential areas have been erased. Buildings that once stood back from the river have now collapsed into the mud. Strong muddy currents are seen across cities carrying debris, vehicles and trees. Many families are stuck under the rubble. Bodies can be seen lying around or floating in the waters. Phone lines in some cities, including Derna, are down, and this complicates search and rescue efforts. For starters, the authorities say they did not anticipate a disaster of this scale, so they were unprepared. Experts say they hadn't studied weather conditions well. They did not take stock of the seawater levels and wind speeds either. So evacuation measures weren't taken in time. Families in the path of the storm remained as they were, and they bore the brunt of the government's failings. As flooding grew more severe, people started being evacuated, but rescuers are unable to enter several regions. Teams are scrambling to find survivors. International aid is pouring in to help Libya. Turkey has said it will mobilize search personnel. The United Arab Emirates is also rushing aid and rescue teams. The US says it is determining how to assist Libya. Meanwhile, Egypt has extended its condolences while learning a lesson or two from the Libyan tragedy, because the weather system is expected to move away from Libya soon and head east towards Egypt. Cairo has already begun preparations to minimize impact of the storm and hopefully avert the destruction facing Libya.
Officials say the number of people missing after devastating floods in eastern Libya has reached 10,000. Rescue teams have retrieved hundreds of bodies today from the rubble in a coastal city hardest hit. Mediterranean storm Daniel caused dams to break in the city of Derna and washed away entire neighborhoods. Authorities estimate that as many as 2,000 people have died in that city alone.
The subject matter today, or thesis, is how to stop Nigerian state flooding in worst decades. Now, before we can stop something, we have to first identify the problem, define the problem, analyze the problem, and then come up with the solutions. Now, after analyzing it, these are the problems that has been identified. 1, the flooding has increased and magnified since 2012. And also, there has been abnormal and heavy rainfall since 2012. And also, this could be attributed to the impact of climate change and global warming. And the government itself has not taken any effective action plan. There is no effective action plan so far to solve the problem. And even the citizens themselves, affected citizens, has not shown any effort in terms of protest to compel the government or the politicians, their representative, to act to solve the problem. These are the problems. Okay? Now, listen and watch. Thanks.
A humanitarian challenge is emerging in Nigeria as the country experiences its worst floods in a decade. 33 out of Nigeria's 36 states are affected by the rising waters. Entire communities have been submerged, losing their houses, their fields, and their livelihoods. So far, more than 600 people have died, and at least 1.4 million people have been forced from their submerged homes.
Now, the next item of discussion is the impact of Benue River flooding in the floodplains and communities due to Lagdo Dam in Cameroon water releases and heavy rainfall that has been occurring since 2012. These are the impact that have been identified so far. 1, the flooded area within the Blue Plain has increased. The farmlands has flooded and crops destroyed. Many vehicles have been flooded and damaged. Many houses have been flooded and destroyed. Many citizens killed or rendered homeless. Travelers stranded and delayed. Pets and animals stranded and killed. Billions of naira lost. And yet, no action has been taken to solve this problem by the government. And no citizens, affected citizens, has continued to protest. Now, listen and watch. Thanks.
The Lagdo Dam in neighboring Cameroon opens its gates every year, releasing excess water that flows into Nigeria. But Nigeria has failed to build a dam to manage the overflow. The Nigerian government says that though they received early warning signs of the flood, they never foresaw this level of destruction. And southeastern Nigeria is at risk of flooding until the end of the rainy season in November.
Now, let's discuss the impact of flooding within the floodplains of River Niger and communities due to Lagdo Dam in Cameroon water releases and heavy rainfalls. The impacts of flooding in Niger River appears to be similar to the impacts within Benue River, with the exception of the following. Now, flooded areas are much larger. Farmlands flooded and crop destroyed are much less. Many more vehicles were flooded and destroyed. More houses flooded and destroyed. Many citizens killed or rendered homeless. Travelers, many more travelers were stranded and delayed. More pets were stranded and killed. Trillions of naira were lost. The reason are this area within the Niger River floodplains are more developed. They are much larger. They are more densified in terms of population. And the buildings are much more, or many more buildings. And that is the reason. Now, let's listen and watch. Thank you.
The country experiences seasonal flooding along these two main rivers every year, but on a far smaller scale. It's a different story this time. Take a look at this section of the Niger River as pictured in June this year, and compare with what it looked like earlier this month when the river burst its banks. Some communities have witnessed water levels of up to 13 meters. We'll discuss why the situation is so devastating after this report by DW's Flourish Chukura.
This is what the rainy season usually looks like in Anambra State in southeastern Nigeria. And this is what the same community looks like now. Swollen rivers have inundated numerous towns and villages across Nigeria, causing 1.4 million people to flee their homes for camps set up on higher ground. But help is slow in arriving. Many roads and bridges are washed out. Traffic chokes those routes that are still passable, delaying the delivery of fuel and food supplies around the country. With key infrastructure swallowed by water, many of the flooded communities are without power and people's generators have been destroyed. Critical infrastructures such as schools, healthcare centers, police stations and banks can't operate. And with the number of farmlands that have been destroyed, there are concerns about food scarcity in the coming months. Nigeria's government blames most of the flooding on unseasonally heavy rain, but other factors play a role.
Now that we have identified the problems, we have also discussed the impacts of the flooding within the floodplains and communities of Benue River and Niger River. The next step is to discuss the solutions to these problems. Okay? These are the identified solutions. Build technical flood protection system comprising of flood walls around the floodplains, levees around the floodplains, floodgates around the floodplains, dredging River Niger and River Benue to lower the level of the water. It also has been identified that the maximum height of the water or flood within Niger River and Benue River, floodplain is like 13 meters, which is about 43 feet. Combining the construction of flood walls, levees, floodgates should be very easy to solve this problem. The levee itself, which is nothing but an earthen field, the sand itself, the sand from the river dredging of the Niger River and Benue River could be used for the building of the levees. Thank you. Now, listen and watch.
So the main reason for this flooding we're currently experiencing is the lack of infrastructure and poor planning.
What kind of infrastructure are we talking about that needs to be in place?
Engineering infrastructure that should be in place to help mitigate flooding, as is the practice all over the globe. But sadly, we don't have that in Nigeria. So that is why the flooding is very, very serious and very severe.
What kinds of, you say engineering infrastructure, what exactly are we talking about? Can you give us examples?
Yeah, so there are various forms of engineering infrastructure that could help mitigate flooding. So you could have reservoirs, you could have dams. And actually, in this flooding we're experiencing, there are reports that there is a dam Nigeria is supposed to build since for many decades now that we don't still have in place. So there are so many engineering experts engineering designs that we can put in place to help control flooding. For example, in the Netherlands, so the Netherlands is very prone to flooding, so they have a lot of structures in place to control flooding. But sadly, we don't even have anything. So I'm not saying we should have the type of infrastructure Netherlands have, because the dynamics are also different, but we have nothing to actually help us affect the question of the effects of flooding. So that is why you see every year in Nigeria, most of the urban centers are flooded.
In conclusion, there are many benefits for building flood protection system, but we are only going to mention some of them. So please pay attention. Number one, the levees and flood walls protect buildings and people and their properties. 2, flood protection system create jobs from building and maintenance of the system. 3, the system increases the economic growth of the nation and GDP. Dredging promotes safe navigation in the rivers. Dredging facilitates efficient transportation of goods and people. Sediment removed from the dredging is a good source for building projects. I did mention that even some of the sand removed could be used and save the budget in building the levees and even the flood walls itself or themselves. Dredging also improves aquatic life. The fishes that are in the water, you have more fishes for the fishermen. These are some of the benefits. Please, thank you for watching.